stealing our clothes?
Just because we black, we stealing your shit? What?
Look at your shirt.
Bad Boys Ride or Die is the fourth installment in the Bad Boys franchise. It brings back Will Smith and Martin Lawrence as Mike and Marcus, the two bad boys of Miami's, going around kicking ass, taking names, putting bullets in bad guys. I was very excited for this movie, so much in fact that I actually put this on my top 10 most anticipated movies for 2024. So when I found out when this movie was coming out, I had to be there day one. I've seen this movie twice now in the past few days, had an absolute blast with it. Let's talk about Bad Boys Ride or Die. So Bad Boys Ride or Die takes place after the events of part 3, which is Bad Boys for Life. And I will say that if you have not seen Bad Boys for Life before you see this movie, it would be helpful for you as a viewer to check out part 3 first, because this movie really plays on the events of part 3, whether it's continuation of Will Smith's son that he didn't know about, that he ended up having, who was an assassin for the cartel that they ran into in part 3, or it's the continuation of the captain's daughter. The captain, of course, a big part of this franchise, but he died in part 3, and so it's a continuation of her storyline, wanting vengeance for the death of her father. And of course you've got Mike and Marcus, who are getting older and are dealing with, hey, this age, and there's trying to be these bad boys in Miami. Like, Mike is going through these anxiety attacks in this movie, and Marcus is dealing with an actual heart attack at the beginning of this movie. And so there really is a bridge between part 3 and 4. I highly recommend part 3 if you haven't checked it out. So this movie takes place after the events of part 3. Again, you're dealing with the fallout of some of those events from part 3, and the movie starts with a wedding. You've got Mike actually tying the knot. He's going to settle down, but Marcus has a heart attack at his wedding, and he has a vision of the future. He sees the captain in his vision of the future, and he knows that everything will be all right, but they are going to be very tested throughout this movie and throughout the storyline of this movie. From that point, the movie does something different and unique from the rest of the franchise, where instead of following Mike and Marcus going around town being the good guys, they actually get framed for being accomplices of the captain and killing a bunch of people, and so they are now on the run. They are now wanted men. And a lot of action franchises go this route, looking at the Taken franchise, when he is now a wanted man by part 3, and a lot of the times it doesn't work for me, but I thought they were able to make it work so well because they incorporated different themes from different action genres. Like, now they are wanted men. Okay, that's cool. That's a different, unique look at the Bad Boys franchise. But now there's a bounty on their head, which is kind of John Wick adjacent. Yeah, that's right. We're talking about an action movie, so I've got to bring up John Wick. Yeah, it was John Wick adjacent because now there's a $5 million bounty on their heads. So not only do you have the police looking for them, the FBI looking for them, but you also have these street gangs that are looking for them, trying to pick up that bounty on their head, and chaos and action and comedy ensues throughout. With all that said, that is my best synopsis for Bad Boys Ride or Die. If you haven't seen this movie yet, I highly recommend it. It is playing in theaters now. If you're an action fan, a comedy fan, if you're a Will Smith fan, a Martin Lawrence fan, all of those reasons are the reason you should go check out Bad Boys Ride or Die. With that said, let's get into my positives and some of my negatives. Getting into my positives for this movie, the first thing right off the bat, it's a Bad Boys movie. We have to talk about the action. There are some action scenes in this movie that are ridiculously awesome. One of them involves Reggie, yeah, the kid from part 2 who goes to pick up Marcus's daughter and take her on a date, and they scare him. It's a great scene. It's an iconic scene. Well, now he's all grown up. He's a U.S. Marine. He's a good person. He's living in Marcus's house, and these guys come to try and take out Marcus's family, but he's there, and that might be the most violent portion of the movie, and it's from Reggie, and it's so out of nowhere, and it's so awesome. The violence in that scene is John Wick level violence. It truly is. But there's more. Of course, you got Martin Lawrence and Will Smith running around being bad boys, so there's gonna be violence from them as well. There's a shootout in a club. There's a shootout toward the end of this film in the last act. It's pretty much nothing but a shootout, and there's so many fun action scenes that on the second viewing, I wasn't bored at all. Every time an action scene started, I was still locked in, even though I had seen this movie 2 days previous. The action scenes in this movie are done so well. And it wouldn't be a Bad Boys movie if we weren't talking about the comedy. Of course, Martin Lawrence and Will Smith are bringing the comedy in this film. Will Smith kind of does his thing where he's a tough guy, badass, and he makes comments, and Marcus really just kind of fills in on the being more of the comedy side of the duo, and they've been doing this for 3 movies. Why change the formula up now? Because it still works. Marcus is absolutely hilarious in this film. film, or I should say Martin Lawrence, is absolutely hilarious, and so is Will Smith. And just the chemistry that the two of them have, the back and forth the two of them had, you would swear in real life they were brothers. Like, they feel like they've known each other their entire lives. Their back and forth is great. Whether it's Marcus wanting to get off of his restrictive diet and eat candy during a gunfight, that scene is hilarious. Or it's Will Smith just having these anxiety attacks and Martin Lawrence just slapping the shit out of him at the end of the movie a couple times, telling him, I need bad boy Mike. And it's so much fun. It's hilarious while you're having all these action scenes, these guns going off, all that going on. The comedy of this movie is awesome. Next up, the camera work in this movie is great during the action scenes, and that's something the Bad Boys movies, in my opinion, have always had. And in this film, there's a drone scene where you're seeing this shootout at this old alligator amusement park, and you have this drone going around, and that is cool. But for me, the money shot of this entire movie is Martin Lawrence runs out of bullets, and he says, I'm out. And Will Smith takes his gun and throws it to him, and you follow the gun through the air, and it lands in Marcus's hand, and he takes his shot, and it is an incredible shot. There's some great camera action going on in this movie. You could feel the heart put into this film. You could feel how much they cared about making this film. It wasn't just, okay, we got to have a shootout, let's just do something, let's do what every other action movie's done in the past, or let's just lean on what Bad Boys has done in the past, have another shootout on a bridge, yeah, it'll be fine. No, this movie finds a way to even take the camera work to heart. It could have just had really badass action scenes, and those might have been enough for us, but they took the time. They said, no, we want to well-craft this scene. We want the camera work to be involved in the action in this scene. So throwing that gun is great. There's another scene, again, back to the Reggie scene in the house. You're watching the scene play out through Ring cameras. They're watching the Ring cameras because they're not nearby, and Reggie's their only hope. And so you see Mike and Marcus sort of looking at the screen and worried about what's going on, and it'll zoom into the screen and you'll get this excellent action piece, and then it'll zoom back out and you'll get their reaction from it. They'll say something fun. Marcus will be like, that's my boy, that's my boy. Like, it's just a really cool way to shoot those scenes. And again, taking that camera work, taking the time to perfect that camera work was worth it. And finally, I really like how they took the time to deal with Mike's son in this movie, because Mike's son killed the captain in part 3. He's not someone you should be rooting for in this movie. They find a way to give him a bit of a redemption story. Now, he'll never be fully redeemed for fans of the Bad Boys movies or even characters in the Bad Boys universe, because ultimately he did take the shot. He did kill the captain. Unless they retcon that in the movie down the line, that is what he did. And I remember in the third movie, one of my biggest issues was, I understand this is Will Smith's son. He didn't know he had this son. He feels like he let him down. But at the end of the day, he killed the captain. He's not a good person, yet they were able to just kind of stop him, lock him up, put him away, throw away the key, and they were like, all right, he's off the streets now. And that didn't really sit well with me. In this movie, they try to give him a redemption arc, but while they're giving him that redemption arc, he, the character, is not necessarily looking for redemption. He understands what he did was wrong. He feels bad for the things that he's done. He tries to redeem himself, but never to just get off the hook for what he's done. He understands and he takes blame for what he's done, and that actually made me like him as a character. I thought Mike's son in this movie was written in a way that, as a fan of the Bad Boys franchise, you're like, man, he killed the captain. But I kind of like him now. And for them to be able to do that, to pull that switch on me from part 3 to part 4, where I'm kind of rooting for him, I want to see him back in another Bad Boys movie in the future, thought it was really well done, really well written. That'll do it for my positives. Getting into my negatives now, the first thing I have, again, I praised this movie so much for its action and the camera work in those action scenes. There are a few action scenes, though, that go a little over the top, kind of away from what we've seen in the Bad Boys franchise before. Granted, I guess there was a movie where they were just dropping cars off of a truck on the highway, but that was realistic. It could happen. I could see that happening. But in this film, there is a scene in a helicopter that is just wildly unrealistic, and you're going along with the ride of it, and it just kind of is what it is, but you're like, that doesn't really fit in what I've seen in the Bad Boys franchise in the past. So there are some unrealistic things that they do in this film with that helicopter, or there's an alligator scene. Granted, the scene is hilarious. Marcus makes it so much fun, but when that alligator scene happens with Marcus, you're like, no, you'd be dead. There's no way. Even if you survived that crazy helicopter crash, there's no way you'd live with that alligator, and yet they find a way to just kind of make the alligator go away. Don't want to spoil the scene because it is pretty funny within the movie. And maybe it's just because they played it for a laugh that it feels a little more ridiculous than it was, but it felt ridiculous. So some of the action set pieces in this movie were just a little too unrealistic for the world of Bad Boys. That leads me to my other negative of this movie, and that is that in this film, they are starting to go, it looks like, the Fast and Furious route, and I'm hoping that they really dial back on that soon. And what I mean by that is that in this film, not only is there a redemption arc for everybody in the past, like Mike's son, I like the way it was written, but they've gone down the path now where an ultra bad guy got a redemption arc and he's kind of a good guy. And I'm like, that's kind of Fast and Furious. And then in this movie, all of the guys you're following, all of the good guys you're following, nobody can die. They can take so much damage. They can take so many bullets. Anything can happen to them. And yet at the end of the film, they have a barbecue. And I just want to preface this by saying the way they portray the barbecue scene is hilarious. I was laughing all the way up to the credits of this movie. But they have a barbecue. And I look at Fast and Furious movies and I'm like, unrealistic action scene, characters that have plot armor, they cannot die, characters that can get anything happen to them, they cannot die, and a barbecue scene at the end. And I'm like, uh-oh, this is very Fast and Furious adjacent, and I'm a little worried because this kind of feels like Fast 5, where, man, I had a great time with it. Yeah, there was some unrealistic stuff, but I'm sure they won't go down that route. And then by part 8, they're kicking torpedoes into a submarine, and they're like, what is going on? And then they're in space. And I'm like, please don't ever bring the Bad Boys franchise to those lengths, because I like them feeling grounded, and I get a little worried. And again, I think part of the reason that that's a negative for me is that in part 3, you had the captain die, and he'd been a big staple of this franchise, a fan favorite of this franchise, and he died. And when he died, you were like, wow, there's real stakes in these movies. But then you get to part 4, nobody can die. People can take bullets and they live, no problem whatsoever. And you're just like, all right, all the bad guys die, all the good guys can't die. Getting a little too Fast and Furious. But overall, I had a fantastic time with Bad Boys Ride or Die. It's a movie I would highly recommend to everybody. It's a movie I will be buying on 4K the day it comes out on 4K. It's just going to be added to my collection. I have to do it. Really glad I put this on my most anticipated movies of 2024. It is one of my favorite movies of 2024. But those are just my opinions, because that's my review for Bad Boys Ride or Die. Guys, if you had a chance to see this movie yet, if you have, let me know in the comment section down below. Let me know if you like this movie, if you agree or disagree with me on some of the points that I made. Maybe you saw it too and you were like, it's a little too unrealistic, or maybe that didn't bother you at all. Maybe you just had a great time with it. I'd love to know your thoughts. Finally, guys, if you like this video and you want to watch more, don't forget to hit that like button, because it helps the video, it helps the channel, and it helps me right here. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Alright guys, we got to the end of my Bad Boys Ride or Die review. Had a fantastic time watching this movie. Again, I saw it twice in the last couple days, and I had a great time making this review. I hope that you guys had a good time watching this video, and if you liked it and you want to watch more of the content on my channel, well, I've got all of my 2023 movie reviews right there, and I've got all of my 2024 movie reviews right there.